What is up, everybody? Welcome to another exciting episode of Shoot the Gap, the IDP show here on the Fantasy and Frames podcast. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. With me, you got Justin Taylor. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about today. We're talking about the individual defensive players in the NFC North, and we also have to debut the newest member to the Shoot the Gap crew. So without further ado, let's hit that music. Ladies and gentlemen, you saw him a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the divisional preview for the AFC East. He was such a pleasure to be around, got to know him more as the weeks have gone on. Coincidentally, more so for our fandom for Batman than fantasy football, but fantasy football still notwithstanding. Got to meet him at the Fantasy Football Expo, competing with him in the Kings Classic IDP division, the Dick Buckus division. And I'm happy to say he is now our third member here on the Shoot the Gap show for IDP this fall, Mr. Steve Hungarter, otherwise known as @IDP Hunter on Twitter. Brother, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be part of the team.
We're glad to have you. You know, you made a very lasting impression on JT and myself. You know, you obviously are somebody who has a passion for IDP fantasy football. You do your research. You communicate it very well, and you know, when JT and I were talking, it just makes too much sense. And I know you have like so much, you have like a lot going on. So I was kind of like thinking like there's no point in even bothering asking, but sometimes you just got to shoot your shot. So we're really happy for you.
That's funny you said that, Jorge, because like I told Joe Bond over at the Six Pack, he's like, dude, you got a lot going on already, but I enjoy these conversations. I mean, it's three guys in the middle of the night talking football. How much cooler is that? You know what I mean? So I live here. This is the only sport I really watch, so I'm a one-sport guy. You see I'm wearing my Fantasy Expo shirt, Jorge, right?
Well, I got my Kings Classic T-shirt on, so there. JT's like, God damn it, I got to be there next year. Okay, that works. That works. That's a Scott. Okay.
I got my Scott Fishbowl Live Cincinnati shirt on, so I'm kind of in the mix. I'm still mad about missing.
I haven't taken mine off since the Expo. That's
dedication. That's how you do it, right there, folks.
Got Mace in the chat. IDP Hunter, hell of an analyst, one of my favorite humans. Great addition. Yes, we are very happy to have you be a part of the Fantasy and Frames family. Just can't wait to see what we put out as a team. Getting all the people in their fantasy leagues, those fantasy championships. Can't wait to help them out. JT, how are things with you?
Good, man. Week 3 of fifth grade tackle football, so we're getting there. It's getting better and better every week, so that's nice. I feel kids are settling in a little bit. I made the mistake. My girlfriend asked how many drafts I had left. I was like, I think only like 2 or 3. That was like 5 days ago, and then all of a sudden I realized I had like 8 to 10 drafts left, and I was like, oh, because I had a bunch of dynasty leagues that were short 1 or 2 members, and they didn't find people, and so all of a sudden they all just started, and I was like, oh, we got to do rookie drafts again. I was like totally out of it, so I'm like in like 3 or 4 dynasty rookie drafts right now. I'm in the IDP Plus charity draft, just started today. He got a really late start on that, so we're moving on that one. First round, I'm up in like 2 picks trying to decide who I'm at, and then I had a bunch of home leagues that I've been doing, like local redraft leagues, and I just realized I didn't have any of those written on my schedule. I was like, oh, I have like 4 of those left too. So my girlfriend, I was like, 2 more weekends, and then we'll be done. And then it's just full-fledged football from there. Then we don't no more drafts. Let's just watch some football.
We were talking about this offline. It's like the Goodfellas movie. Just when I thought I'm out, they pull me back in. I thought I was done drafting. I'm on my last of 7, like this week's drafts. And Jorge, I think you're in this one too. Are you in the wall with Gary Davenport?
Yes.
He just messaged in the middle of the night. He's like, we're going to start Thursday at 9 a.m. I'm like, dude, I got a job. This is not – how am I going to pull this off? It's MFL. You know how MFL, it's all scattered.
Oh, so, the problem with MFL too is like I've had to like really use the auto draft button a lot this summer where I'm like, oh, I'm up in like 3 picks. This might be a problem because I don't know how long this guy in front of me. You never know. Is like, okay, is 3 picks 24 hours or is 3 picks 20 minutes?
Right.
Like you never know. Like the guy after, is he going to pick the guy he's going to pick? So I've been trying to use the auto draft button, like set my queue up and do that. But MFL's tough because they don't let you just set up a queue. They're like, you got to set up a queue for just this round, then a queue for just this round, and then a queue for just this round. And then I was like, half the time I think I'm all set up, and somebody's like, oh no, dude, you auto drafted that one, and then we just sat here for like 8 hours. I'm like, no, I put it in there. I'm like, oh, I didn't set the second next pick up after. So some learning experiences. Like I said, I had a couple drafts started this last weekend that I was not prepared for as they kind of started out of nowhere. I've never auto drafted on accident because I timed out.
You say that though, like I'm not prepared, but like by this time of year, because we go.
Well, I'm prepared. I'm prepared to draft. I can draft. I can draft in my sleep. It's just I have to know that I'm on the clock. Right. I'm like, you got it. Somebody's got to tag me somewhere and let me know I'm up. I can I'll make draft picks all day long. I mean, I've been drafting every single day since the draft started. So that's not a problem. The problem is no one tags me and lets me know I'm up. And then I'm like, oh, guys, how'd you let it go 8 hours and not tell me I was up? I would have looked. So I felt really bad this weekend. It was a crazy weekend. 3 home league drafts.
Me and Mace are in one. We're in a Brazilian league. It's 6 Americans versus 6 Brazilians.
Oh, cool. All right. I like that.
But the problem is Mace turned me onto it. You know, he's in the chat. He'd probably tell you more about it. You have to translate the trades and what they're talking about. So it's almost like going to school. Like I have no idea what they're talking about. They'll have this long-winded sentence at IDP Hunter at the end. I'm like, are they talking smack? I don't even know. None of them tag on the clock.
Portuguese, right? In Brazil, is it Portuguese? Yeah. So
I'm sitting there, and I'm the one guy. I'm the old guy. I'm like, yeah, I speak American. You know what I mean? I'm that guy, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, can somebody tag me on the clock? And these guys are like, sorry, I'm a Brazilian teacher. When you're on the clock, I'm sleeping. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a train wreck. But it turned out okay. It's pretty good. We finished that one up. But Mace Riney, he plays in all kinds of fun drafts. So you just got to follow him around, see where all the action is. You know. He's that one kid in school that knows where all the parties are when the parents are out of town, you know?
Gotta love it. Gotta love those IDP parties, those defensive parties. You know, like just, yeah, no, I hear you.
Oh, my goodness.
All right, folks. Well, let's get into it. We appreciate you tuning in. Just programming note, having a little issue with our feed on our Fantasy and Frames X account. So therefore, we're broadcasting this everywhere. To everybody who's not watching on YouTube, head over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're notified when Fantasy and Frames puts out high-level quality content like we are used to doing here for you all to help you all get your championships and have fun playing fantasy football. And without further ado, let's get into it. IDP Division Preview, NFC North, our last division preview for the 2024 season. Next week, we'll be doing an Our Guys episode. But before we get to that, let's get into the Green Bay Packers. Steve, I saw you're tagging a lot of NFC North posts around like 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern.
Oh, yeah.
I was loving it. And one of the players that you were talking about yesterday, I kind of want to bring up here in regards to the linebacking core for the Green Bay Packers is not so much Quay Walker. I think we could all say we know what we're getting out of him. He finished as the LB27 at points per game with 12.6 points per game, which that's still not that's pretty good. 13.3% tackle rate last year. You know what you're getting out of this guy. I personally feel, and we can go around the frames here real quickly, that I have mixed feelings about Quay Walker. Like I don't know whether I want to, because of name value, quote unquote, pay up for him when I'd rather get Isaiah McDuffie a few rounds later, who had a really good year last year from a tackling perspective. Coverage, not great. Pass rushing, not great. But from a sheer tackling perspective, I went back and looked at it. When he played at least 60% of snaps or more last year, he was averaging 9.4 total tackles a game. I mean, that is freaking phenomenal. He had a 15.7% tackle rate. He led all of linebackers in the NFC North in fantasy points per opportunity. Just the guy was like for me personally, just having him on my roster, he was one of those waiver wire pickups that I was like, I need to fill in somebody. I know when he's on the field, he's going to give me close to double-digit tackles or double-digit fantasy points, depending on your scoring. It's just a matter of, does he get on the field? We had Devondre Campbell still there with the Green Bay Packers, and you think, okay, well, he's now with the 49ers. Isaiah McDuffie, this is your time. No, NFL draft, we're going to draft a bunch of linebackers. Okay, well, shit, and so what are we doing with Isaiah McDuffie now? And it's kind of like all the reports you hear from camp, though, like this guy's locked in. Like if he's going to lose his job eventually, they're going to have to like rip it from his corpse, because I don't think he's going to lose control of that LB2 spot. Steve, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts here?
So just to defend myself, if anybody ever wants to tweet or a message or who to start, middle of the night is my prime time. I work all day. I'm a family guy. That's the only time they leave me alone. The only one that doesn't bother me is the puppy. I got a puppy German Shepherd. She likes to play with my feet. Other than that, I'm by myself. I'm tweeting, waking people up with these tags. With Isaiah McDuffie, to your point, last year, it was like Campbell's getting hurt. Then the next week he's back, Walker's on. So McDuffie already kind of like manufactured a LB2 role for him. So he was an excellent waiver wire pickup. So now we're into 2024. Now we're looking at this season. Okay. I like watching the preseason, not for stats per se, but like just to see how teams gel. You can get a lot of takes out of the offensive line or how the defense runs. The new coach of the Packers, the defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, he actually played with Isaiah McDuffie in 2021 at Boston College. That's when they ranked 5th in the nation. He had 107 tackles, second team all ACC. A lot of people forget this. There was one national televised game where McDuffie was the featured linebacker. He had 16 tackles versus Notre Dame. The preseason, they've been getting churn and burn out of him. He had 24 snaps, a 12% tackle rate. He didn't miss a tackle. And I believe the tweet you're alluding to was something I found one of the beat writers. If you've been watching the preseason and how they're setting up, McDuffie has a role right next to Quay Walker. They're running a 4-3 base this year. So it has been Walker in the middle. It's been McDuffie and Wilson kind of sort of alongside him. Now, Cooper has been coming in, being worked in with Wilson. But for the most part, it's been McDuffie as that 2, Walker as that 1.
What are your thoughts on for you in your fantasy drafts and your IDP drafts when you're maybe going a little bit defensive line heavy because you're playing in a big play league, right? Or you're in a balanced league, but still the point rewards for sacks or whatnot make you want to go defensive lineman early. Would you pay up for Quay Walker, or do you think that's a fair value is that?
I'm on the other side of the street. I think you're gonna get run out of him as a redraft this year, but I think his days are starting to get numbered. I know that's a bit of a spicy take, but when you pull the data last year, Quay Walker allowed 46 out of 54 passes in coverage, allowed 85% of passes. You're not going to keep a job very long. Not only that, they were deep throw. They were 10.8 yards per catch. In addition to being liable in coverage, what did they do? They drafted 2 linebackers, right? 2 good ones, actually. Cooper and Tyron Hopper doesn't get enough love. That guy was a top 5 Buckus award nominee. That's the award they give to the best linebacker in college. He was a top 5 candidate. So to put it all gently, they got 2 linebackers in waiting. They got this McDuffie guy. They got a guy that's questionable in coverage. Cooper's the toast of the town, right? In addition to all of that, he wasn't that great as a tackler. Now, he did clean it up. He went from, I think, 13% missed tackle rate to an 8% missed tackle rate. I would play him this year, but my dynasty mind is telling me to trade off him. And that may be a hot take, but we may be early on this, so we can probably get something out of him now. You wait 2 years from now, it might be over.
JT, what are your thoughts on that dynasty?
Oh, I absolutely agree with Steve here. I think Quay Walker is a guy you want to move sooner rather than later. I mean, drafting first and second round linebackers is not great. It's not great that they're all like, let's look and see what else is out there. I think he's got a better name and I think people think he's more productive than he is. Because if you look at the fantasy numbers, they're not bad, but like Steve said, the analytics on him are not good. And with them going first and second round linebacker, I just to me, it feels like they're getting ready to move off of Walker as soon as they can. So I'm the same way. Redraft, I'm probably all right on it, but Dynasty, I want to see what kind of value I can get for him. I love Hopper. I mean, this Packers defense, I mean, it's been brought up a million times. They never went and got Aaron Rodgers players. They never went and got wide. This team is loaded with first and second round picks. I mean, everybody on this starting roster, other than Isaiah McDuffie, which is crazy. It was a 6th round pick. Every other guy in the starting lineup was a first or second rounder on this defense. Not a whole lot of leagues or teams in the league can say that. So this is a team that has name recognition. I think they're good. I tell you what, early in the season, I thought this team was better. Gonna be better. I thought they were like, they're the best defensive team in the NFC North. I'm starting to waver a little bit. The Bears are making some progress. The Lions have made some progress. I still think this team is going to be good. I really love Xavier McKinney ad. I love Javon Bullard ad. Like I said, they've done some stuff here on defense I like. But I think Steve, what he said, I think he's right on point there.
And you know what? With Dynasty, that's what you want to do when you're playing IDP. You want to get off these guys while they're still a name. You know what I mean? Because once it's over, it's over. You know, like there's no way of getting that value back. So
yeah, they feel like a team that is not going to extend Quay Walker. They're going to wait till his contract's up. They're either going to figure out how to trade him or they're just going to let him walk.
And one more point there, Jorge. If you read the tea leaves, a lot of these teams, they kind of tell on themselves. The Packers are really good as an organization. They draft like 2-3 years out for players they want. Their depth chart is loaded on guys that are just waiting in the wings. You know, we can go all day with that. There's players at every position. It's just loaded. That's what they do. They get the best value out of these guys. They very rarely re-sign them. They go ahead and they move on, and they keep their they draft really well.
So I want to touch on the player, JT, you just mentioned, one of the newer Green Bay Packers acquired in free agency, Xavier McKinney. You know, for so many years in New York, there had been injury concerns. There had him playing mostly free versus being closer to the line of scrimmage. I think last year was the first year that he was actually playing the majority of box snaps at the safety position for the New York Giants, and that turned out to work out pretty well for him. He goes to Green Bay. They draft Javon Bullard out of Georgia. And all of a sudden, after the draft in mini camps, you're hearing, coaches say, well, we can alternate where these guys are playing left and right. It doesn't matter. We can slide one person in this week or this person in that week. And as a fantasy manager, you're like, well, this is horrible because now I don't know who's going to be the consistent player playing in the box. But I went digging through Jeff Hafley's press conference, articles and whatnot. And one of the things he was emphasizing about Xavier McKinney is that in terms of what he is expecting out of McKinney, he wants that run-stopping safety. He wants that sideline-to-sideline play-on-ball safety guy. He wants him all over the field to be that utility guy. When I saw that told me what I needed to know as far as like I can feel comfortable with Xavier McKinney as one of my top DBs or safeties for IDP. But had I not found that would kind of concern me a little bit because it's kind of like, well, where are you going with this? We look at the preseason snaps, again, only 2 games, haven't played a lot of snaps. Both Bullard and McKinney played more snaps at free than they did in box. Again, limited sample sizes, grant you. But for a minute there, when I didn't find that press conference clip, I was like, I don't know. Are you buying the press conference clip, JT, or are you still a little bit apprehensive as far as which safety you would want to draft from Green Bay?
No, I want McKinney first. I like Bullard. I like the rookie too. But I think the idea with these coaches are, especially on defense, with everybody kind of, switching, a lot of people moving to kind of this 4-2-5 look. I think they're wanting to be able not have one guy always drop deep, one guy always come up. I don't think that's going to be a 50-50 thing. I just think coaches are talking about like, I just want to have the ability to blitz a guy and have another guy drop or send this guy and move him back into deep coverage if I need to, just to kind of keep teams, guessing. So I still think McKinney ends up playing more of the strong. I think they're going to play him some deep here and there, just as like a coverage, trying to hide the coverage. I think the same thing, we talked about this a little bit when we did the AFC South with the Colts. Blackman had kind of started his career as a free safety, and then last year really kind of moved into that box safety. And then they're like, oh, well, he's going to still play. We're going to play cross. We're going to move these guys. I think it's more coach speak of like, hey, we just want to have the option to move these guys around. And if we feel like they both can play deep, then we can do that. I think in the past, it was like, you just saw clear-cut guys that were going to play near the line because they just didn't have the range. And you had guys like, oh, he can get deep, so he's got to be the free safety. I just think you have more hybrid guys now all around. So I'm not scared by that. I think, a perfect example, Antonio Winfield, when we talked about DBs last year, everyone's like, well, he's a free safety. How's he going to score? Well, then they blitzed him. They had him all over the field. He was doing anything and everything on defense. So I want talented guys. I want the guys that coaches believe in. That's who I want. And I think they believe in Xavier McKinney. They wouldn't have went and paid him what they paid him to grab him if they didn't believe that he could be the man for them. Hopefully the injury concerns are behind him. Hopefully last year is like, oh, okay, we saw what he can be, and that's what he's going to be, that or better moving forward. I'm a Xavier McKinney guy. I really like him. I think he's on a much better defense. Now, what does that do for fantasy for him? Does that cut down his stats because he doesn't have to make as many plays as he did with the Giants? I don't know. But he's still a top 10 guy for me in the DB range. So I like McKinney. I think, if I'm looking at guys to grab that people aren't thinking about, Javon Bullard, as far as rookies, he was a guy I was grabbing late in drafts, or I was waiting until after the draft if I was low on picks, and he was one of the first guys I was getting off the waiver wire if nobody else grabbed him. So I like both these guys. I think they're going to be a very nice safety core. And really, that was the weak part of the Packers defense last year, and they went and got these two guys. So I think that says a lot.
Steve, before we get to you, I just want to make a comment on Jamie in the chat. Uh-oh. Packers IDP players are packing a punch. Come on, be better. You can do better punts than that. Come on, Jamie. Let's.
Jamie, dad jokes.
Hey, it is late night. Remember, it is late night. We'll take it. We'll take a few of those on the late night show. We don't care. It's all right.
Steve, let me switch quickly to the front end of this defense. We have Lucas Van Ness, who was drafted last year, who we saw limited play from, but we didn't see a lot of, nothing stood out. He had a few sacks here and there, but it's really the Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith show still.
Right.
For me, I held on to Preston Smith for many years in my dynasty, one of my IDP dynasty leagues. And just hoping that eventually that 1-2 punch would be a 1-2 punch, not just the Rashawn Gary show. And eventually I just had to say enough is enough and just moved on from Preston Smith. Is that kind of what you're thinking for both a dynasty perspective as well as redraft?
So redraft, Preston Smith is one of those best kept secrets, late rounds, because people don't know what to do with him. He had 8 sacks, 21 QB hits. His pass rush rate was 11.5%. He's still one of those guys that you can get late in those deep MFL roster type places, With the young guys, Van Ness, we know how age cliffs work. You got to watch them. We only got a small sample size. I do not have lost hope on Van Ness either. He's a stash to me. That Thanksgiving Day weekend when he went out and had 4 sacks, 7 QB hits that weekend, that tells me right there he's going to be a talent. He's going to be used, but it's just a question of when. So strategy-wise, you can still get by with some Preston Smith. That's great value right now. You could probably get him at the end of drafts, and then maybe stash Lucas Van Ness as a dynasty.
Gotcha. All right, let's shift over to another team here in the NFC North. And let's go back. Hold on for Jamie has a comment in the chat. How about the Bears defensive back snatching balls out of the air like a grizzly bear catching fish for dinner? Jesus Christ, man. It is late for you.
What are you drinking? He's bringing it, man.
F it. Let's go to Chicago since he had to drop that gem in there. let's look, this one hurts me a little bit because while I am all about getting draft picks for my Washington Commanders and building up a roster with more players, losing Montez Sweat, that hurt. That hurt really badly. And I think he was one of the few players in NFL history rather, to lead both teams that he played for in one season in sacks. He led the team in sacks for the Commanders, and I believe he also led the team in sacks for the Bears at a certain point last season. So, needless to say, miss him very much so. We look at the average pressure rate for edge rushers, according to PFF, that being around 12.2%. His pressure rate was 12.4. DL10 in Fantasy Pro scoring with 10.3 points per game, had 12 sacks. I mean, best IDP best ball, redraft dynasty. Like I want all those. If I missed out on the Hutchinsons and the Parsons, Trey Hendricksons, I want Montez Sweat on my roster as quickly as possible. What are your thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, I'm the same way. There's those top DL8s. We all know who they are, all the name brands. When they go off the board, Sweat's your next guy. And what you just said, Jorge, he did it all on double teams, didn't he? If you look at the Bears last year, weeks 1 through 8, they ranked 31st in the NFL with pressure. It was like 27%. From week 9 onward, hello, Montez Sweat. Welcome to the team, right? The Bears' pressure rate was 34.3. That ranked 24th in the NFL. What changed? One guy. You know what I mean? Coming in there, just wrecking havoc. And it's kind of neat to talk about Montez Sweat. He's the only player in NFL history to lead him in sacks for both teams, for 2 franchises. So it's kind of cool just to get him. He's a good karma story. I don't know if you remember years ago when we had fancy people would draft Tim Tebow just because. I'll draft some Montez Sweat, put him on my team, just because he's a good overall team player and a good overall asset to have,
Well, originally he was projected to be a first-round pick because there was like a medical report that came out of a heart condition. So I think he fell to the Commanders in the 2nd or 3rd round, and they're like, if you're getting him in the 2nd round, you just got to steal in the draft. And
I forgot that. Yeah, you're right.
But that's a no-brainer here. Is there anybody, JT, along the Bears' defensive line outside of Montez Sweat that is even worth rostering in dynasty formats?
It's tough outside of him. I like some of their interior guys, but they're not really point scorers for IDP. I like them as players, but they're just not going to give you the stats you need. I mean, and the crazy thing is, before Montez Sweat got there, like you guys were talking about, Jaquan Brisker let him in sacks the year before. I mean, you got your freaking safety leading your team in sacks. That's how bad the Bears pass rush was, which is why you've seen them go out there and try to acquire anyone and everyone here lately. I thought they were going to get that Judon deal done, but it didn't happen.
Can you imagine?
That would have been wild with him and Sweat together. Would have been a really nice combination. But yeah, outside of Sweat right now, there's just none of these guys that are going to do enough for me to roster really.
This is JT's football coach background, because there's guys on this team like Andrew Billings. They're great run defenders. The team is good interior wise, stopping run.
I want Billings and Dexter and Senior. I want those guys on my team.
Out of it. That's the problem.
Yeah, I want them on my team. They're just they're the guys that are filling the gaps, so everybody else, so these linebackers get all the glory.
If I'm building a Madden team, that's what I want, but I don't want to do if I'm relying on points every week. Yeah, no thanks.
Exactly. So every once in a while you get those defensive tackles you can take. These guys are just run stuffers filling holes. They're just not going to get points to you because they're not pass rushers. And the Bears didn't draft them to be pass rushers. They literally are like, just take up as much space as you can possibly take up and let all our other athletes make plays.
Well, let's talk about some of these linebackers that have been coming up here. Let's talk about TJ Edwards here. You go back to last season, like you talk of the tackle rate, 14% tackle rate, Fantasy Pro scoring, LB8, 14.7 points per game. For 13 total pressures. So we know which one of the two, Tremaine Edmonds or TJ Edwards, which one was being the one to be asked to make plays all over the field. Huge fan, needless to say, and no, I'm not just biased because his name and my last name share the same name. But, it's one of those things, though. Tremaine Edmonds, when his time in Buffalo, I've always viewed him from an IDP perspective to be like, He's all right. He's like he's like
he's that super cool guy, right? He's got the cool dreads, and you look at him, you're like, man, he just looks like a football player. He's fast. He's one of those guys. He just looks a little better than he actually plays.
Right.
I think so. We're like TJ's like the guy. You're like, oh, okay. You kind of next and nose. I guess all right too. And then, but he's like he's a hard nosed dude that like gets in there as a grinder. The other guy makes the sexy play here and there, but the other guy's the one making all the other plays.
On that thought, you'll have like casual fans, they'll take in Edmonds and they'll forget about an Edwards. How is one guy so good and underrated? The other one is so okay and overrated,
right.
It's just crazy how it happens that way sometimes, I think.
Let's see here. He says, Jamie says, if you miss out on TJ Edwards, are you grabbing Edmonds at a discount? I think we could point you in a direction that can provide you better upside than
the problem with Edmonds. It's hard to get a discount. Like he's not really dropping. He goes higher than you want to take him. That's the problem. I have him about in my rankings anywhere from 10 to 15 spots different, but I feel like it's a lot bigger than that. I feel like TJ Edwards is much better than that ahead of him. So it's just like I feel like the gap is really big between those guys in like IDP actual production, and then the actual drafting. They're like almost right next to each other. So it's like, man, you're just not getting the same. It just doesn't equal out.
But even to answer Jamie's point a little bit. Okay. TJ Edwards is one of those guys. He led the league in tackles, 155, something like that. You can get him after the top guys go. But hypothetically, to your point, let's say he goes. No, I'm not taking Edmonds because there's other guys in that category, in that bubble. If Edwards goes early, I'm taking the guys like, I don't know, Aziz Sharir. I'm taking guys like Alex Singleton. I mean, I have a dozen guys probably ahead of Edmonds that I would take before that.
I'd probably take like a Jordan Brooks in that mix. I like him in there. So yeah, I agree. I think all those guys are kind of guys I would rather have than Edmonds. And I have all those guys ranked ahead of him.
But generally, Edwards is the one that they forget about in that little bubble. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think he's one of the highest end top tier guys that kind of falls because he is the guy that people kind of forget about.
Well, I will argue, like fantasy pro scoring, it's all about tackles, right? 1, 2, 3 scoring. Okay, a little more balanced, but you get 2 points to tackle. I want that. That's very generous, the 2 points, right? Let me get the solo guy in the middle that's going to soak it up. Other formats, I understand why they shimmy guys around because Edmonds profiles as a big play guy. He's more of a coverage guy doing flips, cartwheels. He's that guy in Karate Kid, Jorge. What was his name? I can't think. Jamie, you're in the chat. What's that guy in Karate Kid, the one that was doing all the moves, and he was told to sweep Johnny's leg? Sweep the leg. I don't know who was it? That's who Edmonds is. Edmonds is that fancy Karate Kid doing all the moves, but he's not getting any of the IDP play.
All right, let's go to the defensive back position here for Chicago because I have some questions here, and I, if that's the case, then I'm hoping that you two guys can do a good job answering this one because, before they got TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds in free agency a couple of years ago, Jaquan Brisker was asked to patrol the line of scrimmage and be kind of like that de facto linebacker with Jack Sanborn, who, by the way, I'm still reeling from the day his dynasty value took a hit last year when they drafted.
My buddy Mike Soderlin broke out the Jack Sanborn jersey to the home league draft that we don't even play IDP in the home league draft. I was laughing as I tagged him in an online Twitter draft that was all like just normal offensive players. His pick was Jack Sanborn. And they're like, this is an IDP. He's like, I don't care. I want Jack Sanborn on my whole. He's like, I'll play him I'll play him at fullback. I'll play him at right. He loves Jack Sanborn. Had the jersey. It made me think of him. He DJ'd. He had a wig on the whole.
People still draft him, so he's the Tim Tebow IDP, I guess. There it is. No, it wasn't Johnny Lawrence. It was the other kid, the top talent. Probably one of the better Karate Kid fighters. We got to move on.
Barnes, like Karate Kid Part 3.
No, it was the
Well,
first
it was
one.
his buddy. His buddy was the one they told him to hurt him and actually get the knee first, and then Johnny Lawrence is the one that came in and took advantage of the injury after his buddy.
He was a real life karate kid. And if you pause it enough, which I did as a kid, if you pause it enough, you can see him make a really athletic move. That's who Edmonds is, making this athletic move for everyone else. He's not producing anything for your team. So that's, I can't think of the name. Jamie knows the name because we've had this talk.
Folks, that's what you get here at Shoot the Gap. We got you not only for defense, fantasy football, we got you for the obscure movie references because let's face it, you know you're curious about it too. So that's why you're watching. So we appreciate that. Anyway, going back to Jaquan Brisker, I thought last year there was going to be some real regression with him just because, they improved the linebacking situation. They didn't need him to patrol. And he finished actually as a DB2 in Fantasy Pro scoring, which you alluded to, see it being kind of like a tackle-heavy format. So the addition of Kevin Byard, this guy playing free safety the majority of his career, and one of the things that was always interesting about Kevin Byard in his time in Tennessee was like he was the exception, not the rule, to fantasy relevance. Like normally you would not think that a free safety would be somebody who would be in the top, 12 or 15 of defensive backs, but alas, he was there. JT, we'll start with you this time. What are your thoughts on Brisker, and what is the Kevin Byard effect here for these guys for IDP purposes?
Yeah, I mean, I still like Brisker. The question is, where does the point still stand up for him? I mean, he was right there, right around a lot of other guys in the mix and some pretty playable linebackers. I mean, depending on what league and the scoring you use, I was looking at a couple of my leagues that I had. I mean, he was right there and scored almost the same amount of points as Quay Walker last year. So he's still a guy that's going to produce points. He's still nice. The Bears secondary, they've really improved. They've added a ton of guys. I'm just not 100% sure where everybody plays. So it's going to be interesting kind of what they do and who ends up scoring in this format. Because again, it was Brisker forever just because they didn't have anybody else. And then Kyler Gordon came in and like he kind of played the nickel slot role. And he was the guy that kind of did pretty well for a while. And then last year was like no one wanted to throw at Jalen Johnson. So if you had Tyreek Stevenson in a league, he scored pretty well with you because everybody went after him. So he had a lot of tackles, a lot of pass deflections. So with everybody actually really improving here, that's the question for me is how many of these guys are going to be really IDP relevant and going to be able to score enough points. I've seen Bird going at a decent clip in leagues. I'm always worried when an older guy joins a new team, kind of what that role is going to be for him. So I'm definitely would rather have Brisker here in this group. And if I'm in a cornerback league, the guy that I'm grabbing late that everybody's kind of forgetting about is Tyreek Stevenson, because no one's throwing at Jalen Johnson. We know they're not throwing at him. So they're going to go at Stevenson again, just like they did last year as a rookie. He had a lot of pass breakups, solid amount of tackles. So if you have to play cornerback, I think he's one of those lower end guys, but he's a guy that you can get on waiver wires. You can get late in drafts because people just they don't think about him much. But it might be a couple weeks before we see okay, who is really playing what roles for the Bears?
Not to mention you get Jonathan Owens coming in there in free agency. Does that mean you're going to see a decrease?
Where's he going to play? Yeah, exactly. Is Owens just going to be a pure backup? I wouldn't think that he would be a pure backup, especially with Bird being both those guys being a little older. Are they going to share some snaps? So it's really going to be interesting because I think this Bears team has really improved on defense. I like the names. I like the players outside of Sweat and outside of TJ Edwards and Brisker. I just don't know what I'm getting from the rest of these guys.
We need to stop the show again because I want to point out something for Jamie from Fantasy Football Expo weekend. His comment right now is Brisket and Byard going to be grabbing balls like strippers reaching for dollar bills at the Fantasy Football Expo. Every time I would see Jamie, he could be across the street from where I'm standing. Hey, Jorge, let's go to the strip club. I'm like, that's kind of a random thing to bring up. At the Hall of Fame, in the Hall of Fame bust area, having a solemn moment, acknowledging all the greats in pro football. Hey, Jorge, you want to go hit up the strip club later? I'm like, what is it with your fascination with going to the strip club or just strippers in general? That is so fair.
I too have so many Jamie stories. I'm still processing them. I'm still going to reel them back in. So we're just going to have to just write them all down, make a book out of it.
That's hilarious. I got somebody's very similar to that, so that it makes me laugh even a little bit harder.
Steve, what are your thoughts on this defensive back situation here for the Bears?
So the youth movement in Chicago is real. Let's talk about that, right? You had Jalen Johnson became an all-pro, right? Tyreek Stevenson, as a rookie, got 4 interceptions, 16 pass breakups. This is good news. That moved Kyle Gordon to nickelback where he played a lot better, right? So everything was on Brisker to be the great guy. Brisker's my guy, don't get me wrong. But now we have Byard who came in, and you said it great. You said it great earlier about being a lower-ranking player. So it's Brisker for me, but he brings that intimidating factor. He's like, let's go back to the Karate Kid. Let's go back to Cobra Kai. He's like Dutch. Remember Dutch in the locker room? He's intimidating.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's who Byard is. I'll tell you what about Matt Eberflus. He has a type. These are 2 things that we can take out of his time there with the secondary. They love to tackle well, and they love to take the ball away. That's what Byard does. He's an intimidator. He checks both boxes. He had a 6.8% missed tackle rate. Note to that, Eddie Jackson was only a 4.5, so they've upgraded there. And he also had 28 interceptions in his 9-year career. So he's entering a youth movement. He's the older Dutch guy, and he's teaching – the name was Tommy earlier, by the way. He's teaching Tommy how to sweep the leg and how to do all the drop kicks. So Cobra Kai's back in town in Chicago.
Just so you know, I wouldn't assume you would know this, but we debuted this last week. Every time you say the word Nickelback –
JT, did you get my text this morning? I did know you were doing this. JT's been dropping entertainment. You're my new TV guide. I learned about that. I learned about Hard Knocks. I haven't seen. You got so much TV trivia in you. I'm just gonna reach out.
I'm like you. I'm up late at night all the time. That's when I'm on Twitter. My girlfriend will wake up and she'll be like, she'll fall asleep on the couch. She'll wake up. She's like, "Who are you talking to on your phone?"
Right.
I'm like, "I'm just talking to a bunch of dudes, fantasy nerds on Twitter."
What's that commercial? Jake from State Farm. You're in the middle of the night.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, "What are you doing?" So then I'm always watching random stuff in the middle of the night because I've watched everything 15 times that she keeps falling asleep in. So like she'll fall asleep and I'm like, "Well, I've already watched this 3 times." So then I just keep finding more random stuff to watch in the middle of the night. So I just keep adding stuff to the list.
But Jorge, this is the only time we get these thoughts out of our head. Like when we
podcast, they have to leave somewhere.
You're at work and you're like Brisker or Byard. I just don't know. And you're supposed to be doing like a 9 to 5. So like this is where we're superheroes. The rest of the day, not so much.
And I will tell you, I think I've said this before, but my nickname for Brisker is Brisket because I own a barbecue restaurant. So every time I text my friends that are Bears fans about Brisker, I'm like, "Oh, Brisker's the best." It'd be like, "Oh, a brisket's the best." So it would always change my Brisker to Brisket in my phone. So I just started calling Brisket all the time. My friends laugh about it. So like I'm literally the only person in the world that calls him that, but Brisker is Brisket to me, and my phone is the one that made his nickname Brisket.
Is it an iPhone? Blame the iPhone for the forever nickname of
It is making me say it because Jamie in one of the comments here typed and he typed Brisket for Brisker. I was like, see, my phone's not the only one that does it.
All right, folks, let's go to the Minnesota Vikings here. And I want to call on Steve here to kick us off here because at defensive back, because again, you yesterday, one of the tags you put out there was about defensive back, a safety who in the beginning of the season didn't see a lot of box snap work. And then as the season progressed, that usage went up and up. And I think a lot of people are not, I don't think he's definitely not like a household name. I have him in my rankings for IDP. Let's see here. I have him as my defensive back. I have him as my defensive back 7. That's how highly I feel about him. And you can get him at a discount probably in your drafts. Josh Metellus. What are your thoughts on that, Steve?
And you know what's funny? You can get him so late. Like when you think of the other 3 safeties there, You know, when you think of the other three guys, you're like, oh, Harrison Smith, he's good, right? Or Cameron Byer, he's having a year. Not too many people know what to take of Josh Metellus, right? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the player, okay? First off, he gets interviewed by the reporters, and they're like, hey, what position you play? His answer, I like this answer. You'll appreciate this as a coach, JT. His answer is wherever the coach tells me I want to play. So that's what they do. They move this guy around like a little missile. He's a little heat-sinking missile. He plays everywhere on the field. They don't care where they're going to stick him. But if you look at his high tackle rate, you look at what position they put him in, they'll put him at slot, they'll put him at quarter, play him at nickel. You can play this guy right now. You can find this guy on Sleeper, right? And you can put him in as a linebacker. Just to give you a little bit of some stats on him, he played 255 snaps in the box, okay? Then Fantasy Data had him second on the team in tackles. It was tied with 116, okay, solos. He had first for forced fumbles, and he was fourth. He was tied for fourth for actually, he was tied for fourth for forced fumbles, but he was second for tackles for a loss. A lot of people, to Jorge's point, a lot of people think that he is in a crowded DB backroom. He's not. He has his own position. Think of him as that third linebacker on the team, and that's somebody you can sneak in a draft. Jorge said he got him in his top 8. Well, guess what? You can probably draft him later on, probably as a DB 15, DB 20, and still get him as a DB1 value.
100%. And you know, going back to what you were saying, just to add on top of the stat here, 29 total pressures. Granted, only 3 sacks, but literally using him everywhere. Mm-hmm. It just makes too much sense here. JT, if you had to give like a pick value, like if let's say you were desperate for a defensive back and you're like, I want to go get Josh Metellus, what do you think is fair compensation in terms of like a rookie pick value? I know that's very subjective. Let's say it's like a balanced scoring, tackle heavy.
I mean, the nice thing, if you're in any kind of best ball league, I love the fact on Sleeper that you can play him at linebacker or defensive back. I love those combo positions on Sleeper, especially for best ball, because then those guys can jump either spot. I love that. I think he's highly underrated. Like you said, I think you said on top of. I mean, I got him top 15. I actually have him on by him. I actually have him as the number 1 Vikings safety, or not even Vikings defensive player. Is up there for me. I like him a ton. I don't think that's going to change this year. I don't think their defense is great. I think they're going to need him to make a million plays. Man, it really would depend on your league, but a lot of my leagues, you start seeing the main guys go off late second, early third, depending on the league. I would give up a fourth. I would give up a fourth in an IDP league. I think you're still seeing quality offensive guys come off the board, and that's a nice spot where you get them. I would even pay a little more, especially if I'm a team that is competing and I know he can actually score me quite a few points. I would give up as high as a third for him in a rookie draft. I like him. I just think I don't think he's going away at all. And I think that they're just going to use him. They're figuring out more and more ways to use him. And they're going to have to get creative because his defense has lost some talent and they're not as good as they were last year.
Let's go to the linebacker now because freaking Blake Cashman, week 1, kind of gave us all a heart attack here because all offseason, Ivan Pace has been going around. He's an undrafted free agent from the University of Cincinnati last year who was slated to be the guy in Brian Flores' linebacking core. He was saying all offseason, I'm going to be the green dot wearer. I'm going to be the play caller. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that. I'm going to be on the field at all times. Translation, ding, ding, ding. I want you for fantasy. And all of a sudden, Blake freaking Cashman, week 1 in preseason, he is going to wear the green dot. It's like, what the hell? Is that a mirage, Steve, or are we still all in on Ivan Pace here for fantasy?
So this is a tough question. For me, I don't think it's a mirage. I think they're both going to have kind of a role here. I think they're both going to play. If you look at those snaps the first week of the season, they're both kind of equally going before, of course, when Cashman got hurt. But I think both of them are going to eat at each other's value a little bit. I'm still high on like Pace. I'm still high. I still like Cashman, but both of those guys are going to be playing in that role. I know earlier in the season last year, they only playing one linebacker, but if you look at the later games in the year, there's a role for both of them. So I don't see either one not having a bad year, but I'm not taking them like top 5 or anything crazy like that. You know what I mean? So,
JT, what are your thoughts here on Ivan Pace?
Yeah, I like Pace all right. It was almost like everything kind of worked out perfectly for him last year to kind of fall in that spot with the injuries and everything else. I'm probably not taking him as high as other people. I still like him. It's not like I dislike him. Same thing with Cashman. He's the guy. I think he's all right. I think he's a solid player. I just have not found myself like as I'm going through my list when I'm drafting, going, "Oh, got to put that guy in my queue. Got to put that guy in my queue." If they get to me, I'm taking them at a nice value. I'm not over redrafting them. I'm a little worried about this Vikings defense in general this year. I'm just not 100% sure what we're going to get out of them. And so I don't know what to expect out of those guys. I think they're okay. I like them where you're getting them for the most part, but I'm not overdrafting them. I'm not trying to go out there and find those guys.
Would you think it'd be fair to say that in terms of defensive or IDP value, like scour the Vikings defense in your IDP leagues?
Yeah, so you got to think that at some point, I just think this team is not going to be great. I really don't. And so some of these guys are going to have to be putting up some like decent numbers because I think they're just going to be on the field a lot. So it just depends who are those guys. That's why I like Metellus. I think they're going to use him in a lot of ways. He's the guy I would want out of this whole team. And usually he's like, well, why would you ever draft a DB over a linebacker? This is one of the teams I would. And again, He does get that linebacker designation. So I'd actually rather have him over Pace. I know that seems sacrilege saying you take a guy like that, but I'd rather have him first.
So I just pulled this
Pace
up.
Probably second for me. Cashman in a redraft league. You probably a little more in redraft for Cashman just because the experience. But if I'm going Dynasty, I'm probably out on Cashman in Dynasty. I'd probably have Pace.
Right. So I just pulled it up, and it's really telling. Ivan Pace preseason, 26% tackle rate. Hey, pretty good. 19% of snaps. Okay, he's getting his volume. He's getting his tackle rate. Blake Cashman, before the finger surgery, 14% tackle rate, 14 snaps. So what does that tell me? Translation, they're both in play. They're both going to be used. They're both going to be on the field. They're both going to be great guys, but they're not going to be – there is no one single – there's no Highlander. There can only be one. There's going to be a Kurgan. There's going to be a Connor McLeod in this format, which is going to eat at each other a little bit. They're not going to get the Highlander superpowers until one of them is beheaded. You like that one, don't you?
You talk about Connor and Duncan McLeod, which, by the way, there was a Highlander movie that came out where they were both in it, and Duncan had to take Connor's head so that he can go on and face the bet.
I've seen it. So right now it's just the finger. It's just the finger. He didn't take Cashman's head, but until he takes what JT's saying, until he takes the head off completely, Pace is going to be shelved a little bit, just a little bit of value.
Princes of the Universe, still by Queen, an awesome song to listen to. All right, well, let's talk about the defensive line real quick before we get to Straight Shooter 2008. I promise we'll get to your Lions questions. Don't worry. Jonathan Grenard coming over from Houston. Andrew Van Ginkel coming over from Miami. They draft Dallas Turner. Jonathan Grenard's standalone value. Let's say Van Ginkel and Turner, they rotate in and out. Like, I thought Grenard's value was boosted because Will Anderson was on the other side. I don't see Van Ginkel or Dallas Turner yet basically helping to free him up on one-on-one opportunities. So that gives me some concern. But, he did have a pressure rate of 11.9%, which is close to the average. He had 12.5 sacks last year. Are these numbers, Steve, kind of inflated just because of who he had on the other side, or is there some legitimate value for Jonathan Grenard here?
Smart thoughts. Great question here. I think a lot of people are overpaying on Grenard. He checks a lot of boxes. He got his first payday. People are like crowning him the Jonathan Greener. He's billed as the younger replacement for Daniel Hunter. Okay, all that's true. Last year he had 12.5 sacks, 15 for total tackle for loss. But let's kind of reel it back a little bit. He's opposite. He's no longer opposite Will Anderson. He's got a young crew there. He's got a Van Ginkel. He's going to get a lot of playing time. So I'm not saying I'm off him, but I'm not going to take him as a DL1. I'll probably bump him down to DL 14-ish. If somebody wants to overpay, cool. I'll get one of those top 8 or 9 guys that we alluded to earlier. But I think we have seen the highest of his value right now.
Gotcha. All right, JT, we're going to kick you off here with the Detroit Lions here. Before we get to that, let's get to a couple questions here. And JT, we'll start with you. Buy or sell in Dynasty, Alex Anzalone? Anzalone. I always get that messed up. I don't.
To me, you're gonna get decent production from him, and I think because of the Jack Campbell hype, people are kind of just writing him off, and so I think he's a value right now because I still think he's going to be in the mix. I don't think he's going to be completely replaced. I mean, behind him they got Malcolm Rodriguez, who everybody kind of thought was like, is this guy going to like take over at some point? He's had flashes, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I still think I think he's a value play because when I'm in a lot of leagues and a lot of drafts, I've got him mostly in best ball leagues because I'm like, if he has a big game here or there, he'll jump into my starting lineup on those. I'm probably buying him just because I don't think you could sell him for much, first off. And secondly, I'm buying him because I think the value's there and he's cheap. I just think he's the guy people are like, he's not a sexy name. Everybody wants Jack Campbell. Everybody wants Aiden Hutchinson. So he's just kind of a forgotten guy there in Detroit. So if you want to put him on your list and you're like, hey, I'm going to wait on some linebackers, or maybe I take some big-time linebackers early and I need to fill in some other roster spots, and I need my second, third, fourth linebacker down the line, I think he's a nice guy to kind of target later.
Okay, let's get to the next question here, and then after that we'll jump into defensive backs here. Brian Branch, what position is he going to play? That is an awesome question. Let me tell you why that's an awesome question. Because when you look at his snap counts from last year, he had 530 snaps as slot corner. Now, according to the latest depth charts, courtesy of rlads.com, he is slated to be their strong/box safety.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? Like you're going from one extreme to the other, switching, quote unquote positions. But however, as a slot cornerback last year, again, going back to Fantasy Pro scoring, he finished as the DB24 with 10.6 points per game. So tackle numbers were there. He had that. He was on pace with, the Kenny Moores of the world, or the Witherspoons of the world, in terms of fantasy production. And now theoretically, he should be getting a bump if he's playing more box safety and playing more box snaps, but that just seems like such an extreme shift in position play. I don't know how I feel about that. That gives me some pause. I don't know whether or not that's like, they're saying he's playing box safety, but they're not really. I don't know. I don't know what to think about this, which is kind of telling you right now, maybe this is an avoid situation. What are your thoughts, Steve?
So the correct answer is yes, please. That's the correct answer. William Shakespeare, Hamlet. We're going to quote some theater here, okay? There is no good or bad. It is the thinking that makes it so. Regardless, if Branch is a strong safety, if he's a corner, the guy played 75% of snaps last year. He's a big play phenom. No matter where they're going to put him, they're going to find a way to put him on the field. If you watch Dan Campbell or Aaron Glenn, specifically defense, they come from that hard-nosed Bill Parcells school of thought. They're going to get the best guys on the field. They run a lot of 3 safety sets. So I know you think I'm avoiding your question, but I'm not. It doesn't matter where they put him. He's going to be a phenom. You put him in your team. That's the correct answer there. But he's going to play a little bit everywhere. A lot of these guys do nowadays. You see a lot of that too. You see a lot of safeties go down the corner. It used to be when we first started, JT, we started doing fantasy. It used to be the corners, they get old. They put them to safety. Mm-hmm. You're seeing a lot of the other way around now. It's kind of opposite, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, it's weird as guys lose a little foot speed, and they're like, "Oh, okay, you can play free safety now, or you can play strong safety because you're just not quite as fast as you used to be." People forget Brian Ranch was the number one safety in the draft last year, so he played a lot of corner and he played a lot of slot corner, but he was the number one safety coming out of Alabama. So I agree with Steve 100%. I want him on my team. I think he'll play all over.
You don't know how hard that was for me. Just my old school, a lot of these guys that played, I've been playing IDP since 2004. So you don't know how hard it was for me to be like, oh, a corner? Oh, a slot? No, dude. Nowadays, you want those players. They're going to be all around the Metellus types all around the ball.
And I've tried to explain this and say this a little bit, especially if you've got a team that is typically going to play a 4-2-5. It used to be like, okay, the strong safety is almost that extra linebacker. It's really the slot corner is the extra linebacker now.
Right.
That's the guy that's making plays near the line. That's the guy taking the running backs in the flat. That's the guy making all kinds of tackles and plays. Those are the guys that they're blitzing all the time now. So it's just a little bit of that change. I mean, the slot corner has really become more of a strong, old school, strong safety spot, but they just put the most athletic guy who will come up and make tackles there. So, I mean, I used to think they always think of like, old strong safety idea was like, okay, he's too small to play linebacker, but he's not that fast. Okay, you're a strong safety. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, you're only 220, 225, so you can't play linebacker. But gosh, you only run like a 4.65 40, 4.6 40. Well, you can't play cornerback. You can't play free safety because you can't play deep. It's different now. People are like, I want my most athletic guy there. That's the playmaker now on defense. So it takes a little while to get the brain to adjust to it. I mean, I've talked a lot about this with Devin Witherspoon for the Seahawks. I'm like, yes, he's a cornerback, but really you should think about him as a safety, and he really should be considered a top 5 to 10 safety in the league. And people are like, what do you mean? I'm like, they don't play him like a traditional lockdown, run down the field with a guy cornerback. And so I think Branch is one of those guys. Now, if he gets listed at cornerback and you're in a league that starts cornerback, it's like having a huge like Kelsey and tight end premium. Like that's what you want because that guy is going to put up great numbers in the cornerback spot, which typically doesn't score. Safety, still love him at safety, but not quite as much of a cheat code as he is a cornerback in certain IDP leagues.
Switching very quickly because I don't think it's going to take too much time. The defensive line, it's Aiden Hutchinson or bust, right? I think that is something we can all agree on. We look at the 101 total pressures last year. The next highest person was Charles Harris with 24. That should not be a surprise. What is a surprise, however, is just how bad of a graded tackler he is, according to Pro Football Focus. He had a 24% missed tackle rate. That is like, thank God you can get to the quarterback because I don't know you would be doing a lot after that. So I think it's Aiden Hutchinson or bust here. Let's get to the linebacking situation.
Well, real quick, it's going to be interesting to see if Marcus Davenport can like rejuvenate himself here, being opposite of Hutchinson. Like, I fully expect it to not be anything, but it'd be really interesting if so many teams put like concentration on Hutchinson that he somehow, because we've seen no-name guys for the Lions opposite Hutchinson put up some pretty big games. So it'll be interesting to see if Davenport can really rejuvenate himself in his career here or not. But Hutchinson, you see it. All he thinks about is sacks. All he thinks about is sacks. So when he's missing those tackles, he's like, oh, crap. That guy just ran right by me, and I'm diving at him because like he's just always thinking about the QB.
You want a deep one here? I'll throw a deep waiver 64 team at you. Matthew Betts is the Canadian all-time sack. He's the Lawrence Taylor to Canadian League. He's signed with the Lions. I'm not saying he'll do anything, but I'm kind of excited preseason to see if anything happens there. So there you go. That's what you get in the middle of the night. You get Karate Kid trivia. We talk Highlander. Me and Jorge, we talk Batman. JT covers his ears a little bit when he hears the Batman. But I threw some Matthew Betts at you.
Hey, I love it. See, that's when I always say, I was like, I want to hit that star, put him on the watch list, keep an eye on him, see what happens.
Never know. But to Jorge's point, it's an enigma. We do not know the rest of that line, what's happening, and his tackle rate is abysmal, and you can kind of chalk that up to being double teamed all the time. How's he going to make the play? You know.
We got a question here from the chat from Handycross4759. I do not recognize your handle, so welcome to Shoot the Cat. And I'll let Steve answer this question. Steve, is Alex Anzalone an inside or outside linebacker now?
So here's what's neat about that, okay? Alex Anzalone, a lot of us were kind of off him or we talked poorly. The world owes Alex Anzalone an apology because when he played inside linebacker, you know, he has that blonde hair rolling around, he's missing tackles, but he's getting us garbage points. What happened last year was kind of interesting. They moved him back to outside linebacker. So to your point earlier, what JT was saying, yeah, Campbell's going to be the green dot inside. That actually helps Alex more than you think it does because Barnes was trying to man that down last year. When Alex Anzalone went from inside to outside, he started all 16 games. PFF had run games. He was run graded at 48th. PFF pass rush grade 27th. He actually started to be a really good PFF player. Once he moved, he was just playing out of position all these years. Mm-hmm. So the world owes Alex Anzalone an apology. Alex, if you're listening, I'm sorry. We're sorry here at Fantasy Frames.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Steve there because playing straight middle linebacker in like a dime or nickel compared to playing a weak side outside linebacker, it's a big difference. I don't think people realize how big of a difference it is for what your job is. And if you are speed and a little bit of an undersized guy, which Anzalone is, you need to be outside. You do not need to be filling the A and B gaps. And that's what he was getting asked to do. And that's not his game. He's not good at that. And so I think you're right. He is technically, I think, an outside linebacker for them, but that's because, again, we're saying, hey, they're playing a lot of that dime nickel defense where it's going to be Branch and him kind of on the outside, playing outside in. So I agree with you. That's why I said I think he's a really nice player to take late in drafts because I think he's going to get you some points and nobody's talking about him or thinking about him.
Folks, for those of you who are tuning in on YouTube, again, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you're notified when, here we are at Shoot the Gap and all our other shows crank out awesome fantasy football and now fantasy hockey information. Last question to leave you all here with, and we'll go to Steve for this one. We all know that volume is king in fantasy football, whether it's offense, defense, snaps dictate a lot of things, especially in IDP. You hear that Jack Campbell could be wearing the green dot this year, but we haven't seen the productivity from him. Is he somebody you're drafting and redraft this year to be a starter or even a bench depth piece? Or what are your thoughts here?
So I've taken him as my LB3. I play in this fantasy football draft called King of IDP. Shout out to that. It's like a wrestler meets king. It's every year. It's an annual draft. It's on the IDP page. Guy's name is Will Hulse. He runs it. I was thinking about it because we don't really know. And honestly, when's the last time we seen a young player, a young rookie get drafted and just be plugged in that spot? Maybe Quay Walker. That's probably the last one I can remember right now. So these guys need a little bit of time. So I took him as my LB3 there. 16-team league. I'm buying the dip. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid because, these second-year players, their ADP is a bit depressed. So I'm not going to overdraft him, but I'm definitely going to underdraft him. I'm going to enjoy the value. Again, if he's going to play the green dot, he's going to stay healthy. By default, he's going to soak tackles up, right? He didn't forget how to play football. He's just learning how to play it on a pro level. So let him learn as he goes. Let him make his plays. What is Kenny Rogers, the old song? Got to know when to hold him, when to fold him. Let him hold some tackles. Let him fold and miss some tackles. So yeah, I am buying him. I'd buy him as high as an LB2 type. LB 30-ish. That's a predictable. I play in a lot of deeper leagues. So, LB 30-ish, there's nothing wrong with that right there. I'm not on him, but I'm not drafting him high like you see him in a lot of places.
JT, your final thoughts here on Jack Campbell, maybe for a dime.
The thing for me on Campbell is like, who do they got behind him? I mean, they're gonna play him unless he just is like terrible. They're not gonna replace him. So I think again, if you get him a good value, like Steve said, I take him decent. I'm not overdrafting him. Again, I'm not like running out there, but I love buying the second year dip. Like these are like guys that don't hit right away that everyone expects. I love buying that second year dip. So he's definitely a guy I want to keep an eye on. I'm taking, if I can get an LB3, like Steve said, I love that a lot. Another guy, just to throw it out there real quick, that I'm keeping an eye on is Terrion Arnold. And the reason I'm taking an eye on Arnold is if they end up playing Branch at safety, most of the time, if he ends up playing the strong safety, does Arnold play the nickel back? If he does, I love both those guys. They can be both playing those spots.
I was on it. I was getting there. Don't worry.
So that's he didn't want to cut me off. I understand. So, but he's a guy who's not really a total shutdown corner. He's not super speed. That's not really his game. So he's a guy I want to keep an eye on. Like I said, I'm putting him on that watch list. He's a guy I'm wanting to see what those guys do because I actually think both those guys, him and Branch, with Kirby playing deep, Kirby Joseph playing the deep free safety, I think both those guys could end up playing a lot together near the line. So those are two guys I want to keep an eye. I want to keep an eye on Arnold on top of that.
Nobody behind Campbell. So we're just gonna blatantly disrespect Ty Summers and Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Hard Knocks fame Rodrigo, aka Malcolm Rodriguez. We're just
not guys I don't like, but hey, you know how the NFL works. If you don't have a lot of draft capital in a guy or a lot of money in a guy, they have to absolutely blow it before the team starts moving a guy ahead of them. That
NFL stands for not for long.
Yeah. And also, I mean, he's the first round pick, and everybody ripped him. They want him to be good. They want him on the field.
All right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap up our NFC North divisional preview for IDP, as well as all of our divisional previews. If you haven't seen all of them, shame on you. But guess what? There is a way you can do something about it. Head over to our YouTube channel and watch all the videos there. If you go to our channel page, everything is broken down by the different type of show and which shows you should be watching. If you listen to this in podcast form, listen to the Fantasy and Frames podcast. You'll find all of our episodes there for Shoot the Gap there as well. Next week, we'll be doing our guys a little episode here. And then before you know it, gentlemen, we're prepping for week one, getting ready to get these IDP managers some wins here for their fantasy football teams. So again, Steve, welcome to the family. It's
Absolutely.
Great to have you, man.
Great to have you, man. It's great to have you. Another great episode with you on here.
Thank you. The true measure of a podcast, it comes down to, how are we impacting our audience's lives? And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And you can follow me here. You can follow me on the Six Pack. I got a promo code, Jorge. I want to get it out on the RPO network. Leo gave me a promo code. It's called Hunter. I haven't put it in. I haven't announced this yet. If you type the word Hunter in, you get $10 off your full season, award-winning access rankings. So you can do that too over there. But I'll be here with you guys. We're going to be talking football this season. I love it. We got our bro fandom going on. We got Jamie. Jamie, you're our fourth Beatle. You're George Harrison in the chat, okay? You're with us. Just stay with us. We're going to have some great content this year.
Jesus Christ, Jamie.
Jamie's cracking me up tonight. He is going full bore.
I'm not saying it.
Sometimes I think the Jamie comments you just put up is just you don't say anything. You just put them up and see who catches them.
Wouldn't it be
that's
neat?
Like the new game. Who can catch what Jamie said on the show?
Wouldn't it be neat if years from now we all find out that Jamie was imaginary? He wasn't real. It was like Fight Club. He was all in our mind.
He's Tyler Durden. Yeah, exactly. Love it. All right, folks, you enjoy the rest of your week. Tomorrow night, we have the draft show, which I believe they're doing a Fantasy Pros draft there with Stacey Perez hosting. So make sure you tune into that. And again, we'll be back starting next week with all sorts of content here at Fantasy and Frames. So again, subscribe on YouTube, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you next week, folks.
See you.